Okay, well, that happens, and if it's just you and me, that's okay. We'll figure out something to
We
talk
will indeed figure out
about.
something, right? So I'd like to introduce you again to Taylor Moore, with whom we spoke last year for his first book. Taylor, which was called Downrange and was one of our first mystery picks in 2021. So Taylor, I'll just read this off the back of the jacket, which is
Yeah.
really very nice, is a sixth generation Texan who grew up on a farm and ranch northwest of Houston. He's a former CIA intelligence officer who worked in both analysis and operations, later consulted for the Department of Defense in theater security cooperation. That's all in caps. I don't really have any idea what it means. Force protection and counter narcotics. And now he lives in the Texas Panhandle, where he is on the treadmill that authors step on when they publish books and are successful. Right. So
Yeah.
are you one of those depressing people like my friend Jack Carr, who has like enormous physical energy and mental stamina, and you can actually cope with all of this because it's not nearly as hard as what you did before?
No, this is the hardest job I've ever done by far. Writing, I never, and I tell people that all the time. I've done some hard things in my life, some stressful things. Writing books is the hardest by far, and it's the most time consuming. And I think a lot of it is because it's 100% you. Now you have your team, you have your editor, and you have, all that. But at the end of the day, it's your name that's on that book jacket. And I kind of, I have my experts that I consult about different things, and I do my research and all that. But at the end of the day, the story is mine. And so, yeah, this is hard. And I don't have, I wish I had more. I wish I had Jack Carr's energy probably. But no, this takes it out of me. It really does.
Publication date for Firestorm, this wonderful second book with Agent Garrett Kohl. So a little toast. This is wimpy water. I really wanted it to be wine, but I was afraid I'd topple over. So a toast to you.
I've got my still Austin, so we're good.
And lost but now found are copies of Firestorm, which he is signing and be able to claim yours, which is wonderful. I told him the best thing about it is that this has happened before. When books deluge an author, it's not always clear whose books they are, and authors are entitled to what are called author copies, some free copies from their publisher. Our experience is when this sort of thing happens that what really happens is the author is so excited they rummage in the box and give away our books to all their friends and relations, leaving us to start all over again. So congratulations, you did not do that.
Okay, thanks. At least I did something right here.
You did. No, absolutely true. So I'm going to, this is my last time to read anything, but I plucked from somewhere this really terrific quote, which I'd like to preface our conversation with.
Yeah.
Taylor's 2021 debut, Downrange, drew tons of praise, like a masterwork of classic storytelling, a man defending his own in the best tradition of a John Wayne or a Clint Eastwood film. Think No Country for Old Men with boxes Joe Pickett taking over for Ed Tom Bell. I mean, that's really a rave, Taylor.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it's got all the key characters, all the heroes are sort of fit into that description, and to hear something like that, I just can't even describe it as an author. It makes your day, it makes your year, it makes your life, and so no, it's an amazing. Yeah, I don't even know what to say. It's just really cool. It's really fun to have that, have your work described in that way.
Well, you can just blush for a moment. After all, you don't have to say anything. I chose to read it. For those who weren't able to listen to us last year when we talked about your first novel, Downrange, why don't you give us a little background? Because this is, in fact, a sequel.
That's right. Yeah, so this is the Garrett Kohl series. So there's going to be multiple books in this particular series, and Garrett Kohl's a DEA agent. And people always ask me, they said, well, you were CIA, how did you end up with this DEA guy as your main guy? And then there's a kind of an interesting backstory to that. And it all boils down to my agent, John Talbot, a wonderful agent. And I actually got my book. I was writing more traditional spy thriller in the sort of vein of maybe a Vince Flynn or Brad Thor, if you want to think of it like that, and more the CIA type novel. But I had this little side character named Garrett Kohl that was in that was in my first novel that I submitted, and my agent said, "That's your protagonist right there. That's your guy." And I always kind of knew that deep down. I sort of knew that he was kind of stealing the show, and but it took someone else to sort of point it out. And so we sort of revamped and went that direction with Garrett and made it more domestic. And what I like to say, I because people say, well, you were CIA, and I mean, I did do kind of narcotics work, but very different from what a DEA agent does. And so even when I was talking to John, my agent, I was like, I don't know. That's not my world. My world is the spy world, and that's law enforcement. It's a whole different deal. But I remembered back when I was in the CIA, I remember an FBI agent getting up during a meeting, and he said, "I don't understand what you people do." And he didn't mean literally didn't understand. He knew we were in espionage, but he was a black and white law and order kind of guy, and the CIA world is very gray. And so it just boggled his mind, the kind of things that we did. And I thought, what if I take this law and order cowboy from Texas and put him in that gray world of the CIA? How would he operate? How would he maneuver? How would he deal with these things that he's faced with? And so and the book series is interesting, and it's always going to be sort of Garrett in that gray CIA world, being a law enforcement DA special agent. And so the series is born out of that, and it's for people who haven't read it, it's kind of a fun, crazy, wild amalgam of a modern Western, a spy thriller, a military thriller. It's got family drama. It's got multiple points of view that are not only from his point of view, but we've got a kid from Afghanistan. We've got CIA, female CIA operations officers. We got the love interest. We got all sorts of things coming in. So there's a lot of drama. It's just totally. I think it's maybe a little bit different than what's out there. And that's what I've had people tell me, is that's what they like about it. It's just something different. And so it kind of came together as it was my life in a sense. I'd done this work with the CIA. I grew up on a farm and ranch in Texas. I'd worked in oil and gas. I'd done all of these things. And so you get enough life experiences and you can spin them into a story. And that's pretty much what I did.
One of the wonderful things about publishing or even book selling is that you never really know what the next big thing or whatever surprising thing is going to come along until you see it. And you don't know as an author if you're going to do something that is unconventional or without much of a precedent, whether people will like it or whether people won't. I mean, it's a gamble all the way around. Gosh, if we only knew, I used to wonder going into restaurants that had, like bigger menus. And I used to think, how did they figure out how many people were going to order the tuna and how many people were going to order the lamb chops? Because, and so there's some built-in waste involved, right? Mm-hmm. But it's really kind of the same thing. Every month I'm looking at them, roughly 200 advanced reading copies, which isn't by any means all of the books that are coming out, but kind of within the range of adult fiction that we like, which can embrace romance and science fiction and fantasy, thrillers, mystery, the whole bit. And I have to like graze through them and decide which ones I'm going to read in their entirety and which ones we're going to put our best effort into. So, the leap of faith that you take writing it and that your publisher takes publishing it, then we have to pick it up and make that same kind of leap of faith here based on absolutely nothing. I mean, there's no data, we could say, okay, X number of people like, military thrillers or something, but that doesn't mean that each military thriller will get the same attention.
Yeah.
So, I find it just I guess that's what keeps me interested in it is the sheer lack of predictability. And I think that you having taken these whole bunch of different things and put them together in a mix that only you could write is is a wonderful thing for you.
That's exactly how it went down. And I tell people this story. I said, I had this strange experience, of course, growing up in Texas, farm and ranch. So I, grew up with the horses. Horses are a big part of the story. And that sort of, lifestyle of living out in the country and what it means to have that land. My family, I'm a 6th generation Texan. And so that means a lot to us. So that's built into the story. Obviously the spy part, the military part of it is built in, just, given what I had done for a living. And that was a big part of my life for so long. But then even doing the oil and gas, and I would tell people, I said, it's the craziest experience, because when I was a landman, for those who aren't familiar with what a landman does, you're sort of like the tip of the spear for these oil companies, because you're out there. And I'm living up here in the Texas High Plains. So I would go on these gigantic, huge ranches where you could literally, there were times when I would drive for 45 minutes in one direction on a dirt road and never see another person, just turn around and come back. And I think you can't really even fathom it until you're out here, how huge it is, how just broad. And when you get up on the cap rock, you can look out, and it's so flat from beyond this big ridge. You can almost feel like you see the curvature of the earth. You can't, but you feel like you can't. I almost can't. It's that big and broad. It's the Wild West. And so I was out here, and my mind, and as a writer, your imagination just goes absolutely crazy thinking about the possibilities. And so as a landman, I was the guy that was going out, and I would, meet with the landowners, but I was making the oil and gas deals. So I might literally, make a multi-million-dollar deal off a guy who had, just gotten off a Learjet, that I might go jump in a truck with a guy who had been in federal prison for selling meth. And so for a writer, these two worlds collided in the most beautiful way, because you're getting perspective. You're seeing one side of this, business, and then you're seeing the complete other side. And so again, for a writer, you're just taking it all in. And for me sitting there with the guy who'd been in federal prison, I'm asking all these questions, like, what's it like to be in prison? What's it like to do meth? There's all these things. And so I'm just taking it all in. And so there was sort of this real world experience that came from, sort of being in the CIA, working those real world sort of, I did kind of narcotics, so the cartel, I knew all that stuff. And then, so it was kind of that high level down to the low level, who's in between. And people would tell me stories, because I was CIA. People, I think, felt like very comfortable confiding in me, like, hey, here's this thing going on around here. You don't know about it, but there's like drug traffickers that are moving, dope through this part of the world or whatever. And you'd hear all these stories. And so again, it just all came together in a really wonderful way to create a book series.
Well, it's fiction. So in theory, you have to make stuff up, but you can't make stuff up if there's nothing there. So, it's a combination of your own experiences and stories people tell you, that all comes together, that allows you to decide which of those elements to fuse together into a narrative. I'm always suspicious of super young writers. A rare exception would be Michael Carita, who was like a disgusting 21 when he published his first book. But he already had, if I remember right, sorry, Michael, if I'd screwed this up, journalistic experience and so forth. So he wasn't a callow 21 or an inexperienced 21, but generally, I think people in their mid 30s and on up have more to say.
Right. I don't know how young writers do it, to be honest. And I've thought about that a lot of time, because, everything that is in my work is from life experience. But, but you're right. But I have friends that are young authors, and they're great. And so it's not that you can't do it. But I think having that life experience adds something. It does, at the end of the day. And so, it's well, and again, as a writer, you always want things to sort of, you want your writing they want there to be authenticity there, if you can do it. And not everything can be authentic, because some people are writing sci-fi or whatever, and you've never traveled to Mars or whatever it is. But if you can get that, I think it's a good thing. And I try to do that. And people ask me all the time, because I was in CIA, they'll say like, well, you did all this secret stuff. How can you talk about it? And I said, well, first of all, I said everything that I do, I run it through the CIA's production review board, because I never want to reveal anything. I'm a patriot first, and all this comes second. So I would never want to do that would anything that would hurt our country. But I said, honestly, I said, I don't, the secret stuff is boring. There's nothing really that interesting about the information. I said, to me, the atmospherics are what make a thriller novel fun. It's, what is it like? And for people that have read Downrange, this is one of the first couple chapters. I won't give anything away, but Garrett's getting reamed out by the CIA base chief, and I was like, I know what that's like. I know what it's like to be in his shoes and to, have done something wrong and sit there hat in hand and, beg for forgiveness. And, to me, that's the fun part of writing about this world is to let people know what it's like to be in that guy's shoes. What is it like to have those conversations? What does dialogue really sound like? Because I see it all the time, being honest, mostly in the movies or whatever, but sometimes in writing or, in novels, but it's not real. And that's okay because it's fiction, but I want to give people a taste of what it really sounds like. And so I hope I'm always able to do that and sort of inform the reader in a way that they don't really know that they're being informed. They're seeing it play out in front of them, but it's how it really happens.
Well, authenticity probably is carried mostly in the details, because as you say, anybody can make it up, but it's the more detailed, the more nuanced that creates the authenticity. It also doesn't hurt as a pillar of your marketing program, because no successful author today can actually escape having to be part of the promotion for the book. The days when you handed in the manuscript to your publisher and they took it from there are long gone. Social media has transformed the world, and authors are supposed to be a part of it. So the more realism you have in your own profile, the more I think readers tend to trust what you're writing. I remember the first time I met Jack, and I thought, here's a person who could probably kill me with one finger. I'm gonna be talking to him about his book, so I better be really careful.
Right.
See how it goes. That was when we were doing live events, and I'm happy to say we've gone back to them. And I hope with your next book, you'll actually come and visit us. But
Absolutely.
Let's talk about Firestorm. And I do think that one of the things you certainly succeeded in doing with this story was conveying what it's like to live in this part of Texas. I mean, I felt like I was really there the entire time I read the book, and the emotions of Garrett and the other people. Really, they're really powerful.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
My internet went.
It did. Okay, I lost you there for a second. So if you had a question,
my internet went funny. I said, no, it's Scottsdale, so it's a little bit risky. No, did you hear what I said, or do you want me to repeat it?
I'm sorry. Would you repeat it? It just completely went flat on me, so I didn't hear it.
I said one of the most powerful parts of reading Firestorm is that you truly conveyed what it's like to live in that part of Texas and why your characters' emotions are so deep, their loyalties are so deep, and why they are so willing to resist the encroachment on it. You really did transport me right there.
Yeah. Well, that's the idea, is to I do something, and it's not by accident. It's by design, and I work really hard. I write in close point, close third. So I want people to feel like you're reading third person, but I try to write it more like first person for each point of view. And I try very hard never to get out and get too far into that narrator's voice. I'll throw in a little bit of like history and things like that and a little bit of background, but I never try to go too far, because what I really want is for people to feel like they're there, to feel like they're in that person's head. They're seeing what they see, they're feeling the emotions that they're feeling. And I know I don't do it perfectly, but I try really hard to get that. And so I appreciate you saying that you could see everything really well. And that's been a huge compliment from readers that write to me. I get emails and I get DMs and all that. And that's been a common one, is that people say, I can just see everything. I can feel everything. I feel like I'm there. And so, no, I appreciate that, because it's not just like, oh, I do this, and I work really hard to get that. So it's nice to hear.
Well, I didn't feel like I was there, but even more, I could really feel the rage at the thought that somebody was maybe going to take this away from
Yeah.
Garrett and his family.
It's funny you say that. Firestorm, there was a lot of emotion that came out of Downrange because there's some sad parts, and especially here we are at the anniversary of our pull out of Afghanistan, and so it's funny that the book's coming out right around that time because that's a big part of it, and what happens to in the story, and I won't give it away for people who haven't read the book, but that's a big part of it, and there was a lot of emotions with Downrange because of some of the scenes in there. But Firestorm, I've heard so many people that have read advanced copies that just are so incensed and so mad about what's happening to the family. So it's a good thing. I struck a nerve somehow, but people were really mad at the bad guys, and that's great. But yeah, you really feel for the family in Firestorm because of you can put yourself in their shoes and think it's just what's happening is not fair. And I think whether you've been in that situation, most people haven't been in that situation with the ranch or whatever, but everybody's been taken advantage of before and been in a position where you're helpless, and that's where they are. And so I appreciate you saying that too, because that was something I really wanted to work into the story.
Well, it's coincidence because nobody can write a book to the actual moment in current affairs, but you can't possibly read the paper every day about the Ukrainians and what the Russians are trying to take away from them without translating it to Firestorm.
It's that was a weird one too. So people have asked me, and they say, because you start planning these books a year and a half out, and so the Russian thing was weird because really nobody was talking about Russia. More specifically, the bad guys in my book are Wagner Group, and they're in the news. In fact, they were in the news either yesterday or today. These are the mercenaries that are been going after Zelensky and are real instrumental in what the Russians are doing because they don't have any rules at all. They do whatever they want to. They're horrible, and I made them a big part of Firestorm. And then the other thing too, I'm starting to see it in the news, and it's really strange. Is the book is about rare earth minerals, and nobody was really talking about that, but now people are, and a lot of it has to do with China, because I kept seeing this. Of course, remember I'm former CIA, so I'm always reading this. I read kind of with a little bit of a different eye. I'm going, I see, you read an article and you key in on that one thing and go, well, that's weird. Is anybody watching that? Is anybody paying attention? And I remember thinking, if we get in trouble with China, they have 80% of these rare earth minerals. This is what we make everything out of. This is what we need. If we end up in trouble with them, then we're in bad shape. And so yeah, that's a big part of the book, and I don't give anything away. It doesn't really give anything away. You'll find that from the beginning. But that was another, and oddly enough, where I live here in Amarillo, just a couple of weeks ago. So I talk about the rare earth mineral processing facility in the book. Well, I just found out, or it was made public here in Amarillo. They're putting in a $1.5 billion rare earth mineral processing facility, which will be located not far from where I put it in the book. That I'd planned a year and a half ago. So there's some weird things that just sort of come. It kind of all comes together, and again I kind of joke with the same, like, well, I'm an intel guy. This is my job to sort of piece together where things are going. Now, am I that good? No, that's coincidence. But I think people reading the book, the books are fun, the books are exciting, the books are over the top, and they're adrenaline, fueled excitement. But there's some things in there that you're going to get that maybe again, like I don't give away any secrets from the CIA, but my mind is at work always, and I'm trying to include things in there that are different than what people have seen, and I think some of it's starting to come. It's starting to come about, which is fun.
Well, there's no question that the pandemic illustrated for all of us how dangerous these really, really long supply lines are. If we are dependent on stuff that is not produced within our own country, then that's a problem. And of course, the other problem is that resources are diminishing. Right here in Arizona, we're facing water. I mean, the Milagro Beanfield War is coming back as a real life event. And, it's really fascinating to wonder in this very unstable time, which is partly pandemic and partly politics and partly the breakdown of systems, where we're going to end up on the other side. Thriller writers, I think, try very hard to see just that little tiny bit ahead. But you can be completely undone by unexpected events because, none of us is entirely sure where.
Well, I was undone. Just so you know, another sort of a backstory to Firestorm. When I wrote that book, the government that we had put in place in Afghanistan was still there, yeah. And that we lost that in days. But I had written the book with that in mind. So there's a whole subplot going on, and my editor at the time, David Highfield, was a wonderful man and just wonderful editor. Everything. He was so kind because I said, "I'm so sorry, I didn't see this coming." He's like, "You don't have to change that." I was like, "No, I'm going to change it. I'm going to change it." So I went back at the last minute and rewrote a whole subplot because I wanted it to reflect accurately. But you talk about getting it right. Well, I got it wrong. I didn't see that coming, and yeah, I mean, I don't think anybody did. And there's all these events. I'm fascinated by the black swan. We always hear about the black swan, and there's certain things we see coming. And then every now and then there's that black swan and you don't see it coming and it changed the entire world. I think COVID was a big black swan, and it has literally changed everything, and it changes the way we think, and it's changing the way we view our relationships. And again, back to what you said with that supply chain, it's kind of like, maybe we need to rethink this, because if we're entirely dependent on, a country thousands of miles away for something we desperately need, that's a problem. We better look at that really closely. It just is what it is.
Absolutely true. I mean, some of the supply chain has been stretched by the fact that being capitalist economy, everybody was looking for the lowest possible, wages and pricing and so forth. But part of it is that increasingly we need things that we don't have ourselves. And so, the combination of it, I mean, look at the Saudis for, forever. They've had a monopoly on oil, or they've had at least such an oil resource that they could do stupid things like, start a new golf tournament. Yeah. I mean, I don't even want to go there.
I know.
I can't write a thriller about it's just like,
right.
What are we doing? But anyway, so tell me how it is that Special Agent Garrett Kohl can still get so involved with family drama at home. I mean, does his job allow him enough time to deal with this terrible mess back on the ranch?
So his and I'm trying to jump back. I just wrote book 3, so you have to jump back, and try to think. But the job is creating the drama, partially. That's the problem, and it's not his fault. For those who've read Downrange, you sort of realize he ends up in this situation where he owes Kim Manning, the CIA operations officer, a big favor, and he's got to repay that. But as things unfold and things happen to him, he's sort of sucked in, sort of accidentally, to this world that he doesn't necessarily want to be in. So no, he does stay involved with the sort of, he's sort of the CIA black bag operator, that he's the guy that they call when they need something done. But it's not necessarily his fault. He's trying to get out of that world. He's desperately trying to get out. He's got a son. He's got a family. He's got all these things that he wants to do to take care of. But he just keeps getting called back. So that creates the drama. And then being gone creates drama. And life has drama. A girlfriend has drama. Kids have drama. Everything's got drama. So having siblings and a parent, whatever it is, there's drama. So no, it's just sort of naturally in place. And now that he's back and trying to make the ranch work and doing these things, as you see in Firestorm, taking on big debt, taking on these loans, it creates a lot of problems for him. And that's one of the things too. And people ask, I always say, I like to write in real world drama into these people's lives because we can all relate to it. Not many of us can relate to sicarios trying to come and murder us, or Russian mercenaries, trying to, set you on fire or anything. Fortunately, we can't relate to that, but we can all relate to family drama, right? We can all relate to having some debt you have to pay back, or or people that you don't like that you're forced into a relationship with for whatever reason. And so I try to write that in a story, and I think it's done a good. People seem to enjoy that and like that, and seem to relate to the characters in a way that maybe they don't always, to maybe a more of a superhero type character who's just the lone wolf guy out there, living on his own. And so anyhow, it's worked out pretty well. But yeah, rest assured there'll be lots of drama to come.
Well, the lone wolf kind of superhero is not as vulnerable as the superhero who in fact does have a family or children. Yeah. I mean, it's the old Superman thing, if everybody knows he's Superman, that Clark Kent, mild-mannered reporter, is in fact Superman, then Lois Lane and the other people that work at the Daily Planet are a constant risk. And so, in many respects, the real action hero should be operating entirely alone, because then he isn't going to be subject to, or subject other people anyway, to the fallout from him being an action hero. But you've chosen to give Garrett, a family. The St. Daniel Silva originally blew up his Gabriel's first wife and child, but then he married again and has children. Brad Thor has introduced the Norwegian ninja to Scott Harvath's life, although she was not in the most recent book, which I truly love, called Rising Tiger, where he explores India and China and India and their border clashes and the possibilities of India with Afghanistan just sort of off to the side. And, that all takes me back to the 19th century and the great game that the British played. But the truth is that Afghanistan is the place where empires have gone to die. From the Romans on, nobody, for whatever reason, has ever been able to deal with Afghanistan. Not the Romans, not the British, not the Russians, not us. Probably others got lost. And I don't know if it's an accident of geography or what it is that makes it, so impossible. But it really is. I mean, we're just in a long line of people who have tried to subdue or shape up or deal with, or whatever what you want to call it. And I'm not at all surprised that the government didn't last more than 13 seconds or something, because it was unstable at the outset. So who knows how it will go? I mean, there are intractable situations. Israel and Palestine is the 20th century problem. Ireland started under Elizabeth I, and it's still not resolved. I mean, they can go on for forever. So why should it be different with Afghanistan? But you do. It's interesting that you're dealing with Russians in this book, that you're dealing with disinformation, if not outright assault. And, after so many years where all thrillers were Middle Eastern, I mean, it was always in the sandbox, with occasional forays over to the Far East or something. Mm-hmm. And Russia was just kind of, since Glasnost, it was just kind of simmering there. And now all of a sudden, both in real life and in books, it's come roaring back.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, how do I put it? It's fun, right? I mean, I guess it'd be more fun if it wasn't real and it wasn't so dangerous, but maybe that's what makes it interesting to us, because we know this is going on. And again, it's not the sort of big, back in the Cold War, we always had that sort of nuclear, specter hanging over us always. Now things have gotten sneakier. We have the cyber stuff, we have the social media stuff, we have the election stuff. We've got all these things that are going on. Havana syndrome, HV, all these different things that we're seeing that seem to be sort of playing out in the spy world again, that are sort of nefarious and very dangerous. So the what I write about in Firestorm, I think people are going to enjoy this. And I've had other people that, have done interviews, and they said, reading the book sort of made me think. It made me think. And again, we talked about recently, we've probably seen, the Chinese buying up farmland next to US military bases and some things like that. and people are like, is this really happening? Is this really going on? And it really is going on. And so I think Firestorm hits at a very interesting time when people think, there was a mindset again that we all grew up with, where this war is going to be this gigantic, huge missiles launched, tanks, battling it out somewhere in Europe. And it may not be that way at all. It may be more of a shadow war, and kind of like what you're seeing. And it may play out in cyber world. It may play out in economics and things that we're doing like that. And again, like with the rare earth things that I bring up in the book, it may play out in a very different way than what we're used to. It may be about resources. It may be shutting off economies to where they can't function, and it may be bringing Americans against each other. How hard would it be to spark a civil war? I mean, just keep feeding people information to make each other hate each other. They don't have to fire a single shot. All they've got to do is get us to kill each other. And so I think it's scary times, but as a thriller writer, it's interesting times, and it gives you a lot of fodder to take your books in a certain direction.
What an interesting point. I was talking to somebody the other day about that this is an excellent time for historical fiction, because at least there we know how it came out. And even though we're reading our way through the tumult of, let's say, the Napoleonic War, or, the fall of the Roman Empire or something, we have a grasp on the general shape and the outcome. There's a very good book that we featured in July in historical fiction called December 41, which involved a German attempt moving from Los Angeles to Washington to assassinate FDR and Churchill. And even though we know that it didn't happen, it's still an extremely suspenseful book, and it takes us into some highways and byways of America. Because it's easy to think after the fact that everybody was united, that everybody was pulling together to defeat the Axis powers, but that's not true. There just was a book published about many of especially the upper class in Britain, were more aligned with Hitler than they were with, keeping democracy or whatever passes for it in England going. And, my own theory is that Winston Churchill, almost all by himself, kept it together. His rhetoric was so astounding that, he was able to, and FDR did the same thing really in his fireside chats, that even though there was all this kind of chaos underneath them, they were able to, pull it together. And, I keep hoping something like that will happen here, because right now there's too many voices. There are way too many voices involved. And it's difficult to know which ones you can believe, which ones make any sense to you. And I think that's part of the turmoil. But I'm a child of the McCarthy era, because I was, very young and then a teenager while it all went on. And it took 9 years to get rid of Joseph McCarthy. 9 absolutely awful years. And, my own theory, Taylor, is that most people just want to get on with their lives. That, there are extremists and there are moments of outrage and so forth, but you really can't lead a whole life consumed by outrage. So, in the end, I think most people would like it to sort of simmer down and, to try to forge some sort of life for themselves and people they care about. We see the Ukrainians doing this, trying very hard to lead lives while all this stuff is raging around them. And if the nuclear plant goes up or whatever, then there it is. So we'll see.
I think you're right. And I think, as a guy with 2 young children, kids, I hope for that, exactly what you're saying, is that everything simmers down, calms down, we get back to normal. And you're right, as we're talking books, there's a quote that really haunts me. Is from C.S. Lewis. I don't know if you read the Screw Tape Letters, but there's a line, I'll butcher it, but I remember they said something, it's screw tape to wormwood, and they said, in the end, we'll make the entire universe a noise. And that line always haunts me, because I feel like we're kind of there. I feel like all there is noise, and there's no real like you said, the fireside chats, the Winston Churchills. We need a single voice of reason to come in and give people hope and really sort of calm things down and say, here's where we're going, here's our direction forward, because the whole universe is noise right now. But you know, I think this isn't the first time the world's been in, you know, chaotic. It's been way worse than this, and it'll get worse again, and that's just the ebb and flow. But there are some things, you know, you brought up the Afghanistan, and I think there's some things we always, as human beings, we want to sort of think this time it'll be different, but it probably won't, right? And so it's who we are as humans. We want change, we want good things, but there are some constants, and I think we have to accept that. So I don't know, but I don't think we have to accept, like you said, the sort of chaos right now. Hopefully that'll calm down and everybody just get back to living their lives.
The best you can do is tell stories and hope that through your stories you help illuminate people's decisions and through their, you know, their lives, what's important to them. I mean, you make it very clear in Firestorm what's important to Garrett and, you know, the people close to him. I mean, we know because you've mentioned you've already done book 3, and because we know this is a series that while everybody else may be at risk, Garrett's going to survive in order to be in book 3. So, you know, there's a certain safety net that we have as readers when reading a series, as opposed to authors who choose to tell a series of standalone stories in which, you know, everybody can die. But that doesn't mean that there aren't terrible risks for the people around him, Garrett.
That's right.
So what can I say? What can you preview book 3 at all, or would you rather keep it under the radar since you're rewriting it and you haven't turned it in yet?
I don't know. What would my editor say?
I don't know, because it's not David anymore. So if it were David, I probably could tell you.
Well, I have a new editor. You know, David retired, and so
I know, breaking my heart. I've known him forever, and he's a wonderful editor. What it still is, even if he's retired.
He is wonderful. But I have
Matt
on there.
He has a voice. He has a voice now. How exciting.
I connected the Yeti, and that fixed everything. So I actually do have a few questions from the audience that I'd like to, I'm sure they would love to get some answers from Taylor about.
Go for it. Yeah, I'm ready.
Right.
Barbara and I've had a good chat, so we'll take some questions.
So Renee Herskovitz actually has a few great questions, but one she was really interested in is, are you concerned about monkeypox in the USA and world COVID-19 did?
Monkeypox. I will be honest. I don't know anything about monkeypox other than sort of the basic, you know, little blurbs we might see pop up like monkeypox here, monkeypox there. I think because of COVID, we kind of have to look at anything that pops up like that. In the old days, you know, the things came that were scary, like SARS or whatever, and we kind of went, they kind of popped up and left. And I think the same thing with COVID. You know, people kind of thought, it'll be like SARS. You know, we'll be real scared for like a month, and then it'll sort of go away. Monkeypox, I don't know a whole lot about it, but I think just because of COVID, we have to take all those things pretty seriously and just make sure we jump on it right from the start and really, you know, get people educated on what to do and how to fix it and put those resources there to knock it out if possible.
I will add that I think even scarier than monkeypox is the fact that polio has been detected in sewage in New York City, meaning that that virus, which we thought had gone away thanks to the Salk vaccine, hasn't. And you know, polio is not anything anybody ever wants to get. It is really a terrible disease. So, you know, disease has been circulating. If you go back and read historical fiction, it was malaria that picked people off all the time, or tuberculosis or whatever. So, you know, COVID is a new thing, but, you know, viral infections are an old thing.
Yeah, Spanish influence. I mean, yeah, if you look at some of the, you know, go back to the past, and I know, and I think we do have to be careful. Yeah, so I hadn't heard about the polio, but that's horrifying, you know. And I remember hearing a doctor, I don't know if this is right, but they were talking about, you know, LA has sort of fallen into a state of I don't know what's going on over there, but they said they were worried there were some conditions, some places so bad they thought the plague could come back. I'd always heard that it was still in India and places where there's extreme poverty, but this doctor was serious about that, and I thought surely not. But is that the case? I don't know. I mean,
If there are rats, there is the possibility of plague.
well, there are the rats in New York. We've all seen those, right? Those big, suckers that are walking around. So, I mean,
It
yeah.
has to be the rats that the fleas like in order to propagate the plague. But let's find another question, PK.
Yeah.
Scary.
Absolutely. So Renee also wanted to know, are you a pantser or a plotter?
Yeah, people ask me that all the time, and I don't really know the answer. I probably a combo, probably a little bit of a combo. I have sort of like when I write, I have this very sort of general outline of like what I'm gonna do, but chapter by chapter, and I always joke. I tell people, I said I'm not like a super artsy guy. There's one thing I'm a little bit artsy about, and I will say that there is a magic on the page. I'll have this outline. I'll kind of like know where the story's going. But when I go to a chapter, I'll say like, this is going to be Garrett and his girlfriend. They're going to have a conversation. I wonder what they're going to say. And so I just, Garrett walks into the room. He says hi. She says hi. And then I go from there. And so I don't know if that answers the question in any good way, but I just have my own strange. It's probably a combo.
Do you find that you have to do an entire cleanup by the time you're done, once you've done or an entire revision, or do you find that you keep most of your book?
My first draft is pretty good. Honestly, it's pretty good. It's pretty solid. And so by the time I get through with it, and maybe it's a process of going too slow or something, because I always find myself up against a deadline. I mean, I think most authors do, where it's like the last month or two, you're just, working all these 7 days a week, nights, mornings, whatever, and miserable. So that's always me. But no, I kind of think it through pretty well usually. And it's not to say there's not some changes, but I usually kind of have a pretty good idea of where I'm going to go.
Well, I think those were the total questions that I had from the audience today, Barbara.
Well, let me ask one or two then, because you have talked a little bit about your writing process, which is always a major question. But most people are interested whether you were, or most people who write were readers before they were writers.
Yeah.
So do you have any books from your past or books of the present that you particularly want to recommend to anybody? I feel like the New York Times doing that, by the book thing where they always want to know like 5 books, you can't live without or whatever it is.
Yeah. So I'll say these two are my favorite books, and it'll make sense when you see the stories that I'm writing, because it's kind of a combo and it doesn't make sense. My all-time favorite book is Lonesome Dove by Larry McMurtry. And it just, to me, it's everything that a book should be. And as obviously it's not in my opinion, it's a Pulitzer Prize winning novel, and it was a great book and recognized by a lot of people. So I love that. And I love the characters. And to me, when I set out to write a thriller, I wanted to write a character-driven thriller. I wanted to write thrillers that people couldn't put them down because they wanted to see what happens to the characters. They felt for them. They loved them. They want to see what happens. And so Lonesome Dove, was always a big one for me. My all-time favorite thriller in the world is The Charm School by Nelson DeMille. And
so glad you said that. Do you know that for years at the Poison Pen, my mother loved this book with a passion. We kept it on the counter because we were in a slightly different location and people didn't have Kindles or anything. So time after time, people would rush into the store and say, quick, I need an airplane book. And, and so we just kept The Charm School there, and we just, I don't even know how many hundreds of copies that we sold of it. It was so great. And Nelson, I'm pleased to tell you, is coming back to the store with a new book in October, and I can't wait to read it because he's such a wonderful writer.
He is, and I've always looked for him at Thriller Fest. I never have seen him yet, and I always want to shake his hand and say, man, you wrote the book that I will be chasing for the rest of my life as a thriller writer.
You know what? I have a proposition for you. If you're in October, I'll have to go look up the exact date. You can come up and you can join me in talking to Nelson if you'd like to.
I'd love to do that. So let me know. Yeah,
Why
that'd be
don't you
great.
think about it? Because he's not getting any younger, nor am I. And
Yeah.
I think it's important to embrace our opportunities to see him
Yeah.
while we can. So
Let me know about it. That'd be great.
yeah, it's somewhere fairly second week in October, I think. But anyway, I'll
Okay.
send you the date when we're through here. But that would
Okay.
be really
Yeah.
very nice. Would
No,
love
that'd be really fun. Yeah, I could do
Yeah,
that.
good.
Absolutely. So
Well,
appreciate it.
we've lost PK, so we can't
Okay.
actually have him in the meeting, but you
Okay.
and I could.
Yeah.
You and I could leave the meeting, leaving a blank screen behind, but it's really been a pleasure to talk to you again, Taylor. I was so pleased to read sorry, now I've forgotten the name.
No, Firestorm. Yeah, down. Yeah.
No, your first book, Downrange.
Oh, downrange.
I
Yeah.
really, and part of the problem was, and it was really funny, is that Morrow last year also introduced us to Taylor Adams. So
Okay. Yeah.
for ages, I have same publisher, Taylor, I have to sort of keep you in my Taylor 1, Taylor 2,
Yeah.
to keep it going. And I think you both wrote really wonderful books about the West, with new characters. But anyway, it's a great pleasure to discover your work, and I'm glad that Firestorm is out, and I'm glad that you are signing your copies and our copies and sending them to us, right?
As soon as I can get them, it'll be too.
That'll be great. Okay, well, click leave meeting, and we'll let Pat figure out how to end this when he shows up again, okay?
Thank you, Barbara. It's great being on the show. Thanks for having me.
Good night.
Good night.